What are my top whiskeys of 2023? Let's find out. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and we're coming to the end of the year, which means one thing. It's Whiskey of the Year season, and that's why I'm bringing you my top whiskeys of 2023. So I want to talk about my favorite whiskeys of 2023. On this list, to be considered, it has to be a whiskey I tried this year. It doesn't have to be bottled this year, but something I did try in 2023. There are a number of whiskeys I had in Scotland on my trip that were fantastic. They are excluded from this list. That'd be too much of an upper hand. I will be talking about my favorite whiskeys from our Scotland trip and possibly do a list of those in the future, but they are not included or eligible on this list. As well, independent bottlings or official bottling single casks, again, very hard to get. I don't know how helpful it is for you, for me to tell you all about them. I am going to talk about them in two categories briefly, but otherwise I am planning a best independent bottlings of 2023 list as well. Finally, there's a requirement for value only or availability only in the categories that I'm specifying. Otherwise, any core range, relatively widely distributed bottling is fair game. My favorite whiskey of 2023 is in the glass beside me, and you'll have to watch till the end to find out what it is. Let's get to the list. My best value blended Scotch whiskey of 2023 is the Maclean's Nose Blended Scotch. Runs about $50 to $55 Canadian. In Alberta, it's 46% ABV. It's non-chill filtered. It's natural color, and it is brought to us by by Adelphi, the independent bottler, as well as the Ardnamurchan distillery. Now, what is Maclean's Nose? It is about 4 to 6 years old, and it is made mainly of 70% malt and 30% grain, so very high malt content for this blended Scotch. And of that malt content, most of it is from the Ardnamurchan distillery, and a small portion is from the Glen Scotia distillery. This whiskey is a fantastically coastal, actually decently peated blended Scotch I really enjoyed. I only recently got to try it, and it was quite phenomenal, especially for the price. My best value blended malt Scotch whiskey of 2023 is going to the Campbelltown Lock, a whiskey I fell in love with as soon as I got to try it. Running about $65 to $70, and that's going off of UK prices because it's so rarely seen here in Canada. It's bottled at 46%, it's non-chill filtered, it's natural color, and it's a blended malt from the J.A. Mitchell group, which is basically it's Springbank distillers, and it's comprised of every single malt whiskey that's currently being made in Campbelltown. Now that includes Springbank, Longrow, Hazelburn, Kilkerran, and Glen Scotia. It's a fantastic idea, it's a wonderful feat, and it really is a bloody good whiskey at a fantastic price. It's a great option if you can't get your hands on a bottle of Springbank 10. Finishing up with the blends, my best overall blended malt Scotch whiskey of 2023 is the NAS 30-year-old blended malt. This is coming from the Decadent Drinks Company, and it is a whiskey that NAS does not stand for non-age statement. As you just heard, it's 30 years old. It stands for notable age statements, and it's bottled at 45.1% ABV, and that is natural cask strength. It's non-chill filtered, and it's natural color. This is coming to us from Angus McRailed, who you might know from Whiskey Sponge and Whiskey Fun, as well as the Decadent Drinks Company, and this is just a wild whiskey. This blended malt was made from stocks from the signatory independent bottling warehouses. Now, to make this blended malt, they took leftover cask samples and bottling run ends over 16 years old, or at least 16 years old. They then filled a first fill fresh sherry cask with these whiskeys, and then let that cask sit until 2022 when it was bottled, where the youngest whiskey in the cask in this blend was 30 years old. I'm mentioning youngest whiskey because there is much older whiskeys in this blended malt, some dating back to the 1960s and hailing from closed distilleries. As I said, this is just a bonkers whiskey. I've been lucky enough to try it a number of times this year, 3 times to be exact, and I felt blessed to try each one of those times. The nose is absolutely crazy. It's probably the best nosing whiskey I've had all year. It truly feels like something of another era and another age, and the palate is no slouch either. It's all these old leather, fruit, earthy tobacco tones. Like the nose is just, it really truly encompasses the word Velicor, if you're familiar with that from the Compass Box release. A feeling of an old bookstore, an old library. This is a phenomenal whiskey, and it's something I will cherish having for a long time. It does run $600 Canadian, but there's a big reason for that. It is all these wild, old, truly unique whiskeys that went into it. The one independently bottled single cask I want to mention on this list, because I am doing a separate list, is going to be my best overall, taking in value and quality, single cask, independently bottled single malt, and that is the Gordon MacPhail Highland Park 1997 27-year-old refill sherry butt single malt whiskey. Now this whiskey is bottled at 59% cask strength. It's non-chill filtered, this natural color. There was 461 bottles, and it was running about $385 to $400 Canadian, which is an absolute steal when you consider that an official bottling Highland Park 25-year-old in this country, at least in my province, runs about $1,500 Canadian, and that is not at cask strength. This is a full force, brash, powerful Highland Park with a lot of class and refinement. It gives you all the oak, leather, dark chocolate, dark fruits, honey, and just sweet tones you could ever want. It is everything you want in a Highland Park whiskey and more. This was just a phenomenal whiskey. I'm glad I got to try it multiple times, and it's one of my absolute favorites of the year. If you follow the channel closely, you probably already know this one, but my best Canadian whiskey of 2023 is the Shelter Point 10-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. It's coming from Campbell River in Vancouver Island, British Columbia. It is 10 years old, bottled at 46% non-chill filtered, natural color, runs about $120 Canadian, is entirely aged in ex-bourbon casks. It's a coastal, fruity, sweet dessert dram with the absolute lightest tinge of smoke. I adore this whiskey. I adore the distillery, and I did a full review of this. Check that out if you want more information. I can't wait to try the 12-year-old that they've released. But if you want, go ahead and check out my top 5 Canadian whiskeys of 2023 video. This features in it, along with a bunch of other fantastic Canadian whiskeys. My next category is Best Value Heavily Peated Single Malt Scotch Whiskey for 2023. I do want to mention a quick runner-up here, which is the Legic Sinclair Series Rioja Cask Single Malt. I love Legic. I love that whiskey, what I've been able to try of it, but I haven't been able to have much of it because it is not sold in Canada. It is a fantastic red wine cask finished heavily peated whiskey at a great price. If you can get that in your market, it is well worth a shot, but it is not I haven't had enough experience with it to consider it one of my whiskeys of the year. However, I am giving the Best Value Heavily Peated Single Malt Scotch Whiskey of 2023 to Kilkerran Heavily Peated. Now, this is coming from the Glengyle Distillery in Campbelltown. It is basically run and operated by the J.A. Mitchell Group Springbank Distillers Group. In this heavily peated, this is the batch 4 on the table, and I did try this before 2023, but it's basically a placeholder for batches 6 and 7, which were both phenomenal. This batch in particular is 58.6%, but they're all cask strength. They all have a certain split between ex-bourbon and sherry casks. This one was 80% ex-bourbon, 20% sherry. They are non-chill filtered, they're natural color, they're doing everything right with these. They're a fruity, funky, intensely peated adventure in a bottle. They're hugely characterful and a great alternative to Octomore, in my opinion, coming in at a very strong, hugely big 84 phenol parts per million, 84 ppm. That's a massive number. Really does great having some time to open up in the bottle. In my experience, it really improves with some headspace in there. So if you try it and you don't like it immediately, set it aside for a bit and let it open up, because I do think this is an absolute little gem of a whiskey for about $85 Canadian is what I've picked up bottles for in the past. Yeah, that's a hell of a deal. My best overall heavily peated single malt Scotch whiskey of 2023 is the Legic 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. This whiskey is coming in at 46.3% ABV. It's non-chill filtered, it's natural color. It spent 16 years in ex-bourbon casks, 2 years in sherry casks, and I absolutely adore this whiskey. This is a happy place whiskey for me. If you watched my review, then you'll get a sense of just how much I love this whiskey and how good it really is. The peat isn't even all that bold after 18 years. It really has been tamed, but the whiskey has been transformed into a coastal, rich, delicately smoky, and nicely fruity dram. I'm glad they left this sherry finish a little bit lighter with the 2 years as opposed to more, because it really does balance between the ex-bourbon influence and the sherry influence quite nicely. Honestly, if only they sold this whiskey in Canada, I'd probably have one bottle of this open on my shelf at all times and another one in stock as a backup just in case. I hope they fix that someday, but it is just an unreal whiskey. My best value cask strength single malt Scotch whiskey of 2023 is the Benromach cask strength 2013 Batch 1. It's a phenomenal whiskey. It's 59.7% ABV. It's not chill filtered. It's natural color. As always, it's entirely first fill ex-bourbon and sherry casks, no refill in there, and it's about 10 years old. This whiskey runs about $100 Canadian, though I got mine for about $85 Canadian, which is an absolute steal. It's rugged, it's characterful, it's fruity, single malt with an industrial, almost farmy funk edge to it. I love it. I adore Benromach, and this whiskey, again, is no exception. This drinks way too easily for a whiskey. It's about 60% ABV, and please keep these batches coming, Benromach, because for the price quality ratio, I'm not sure there's a better whiskey out there on the market. It's a thing of beauty. I'll continue to enjoy this bottle and get to know it more and more. I hope to bring you guys a review of it in the new year. I honestly think this might be a good matchup in a blind versus Springbank 12 cask strength. Second to last category is best value single malt whiskey of 2023. The runner-up in this category I wanted to mention because it is just so good, and that's the Legic 10-year-old from the Tobermory Distillery on the Isle of Mull. This is at 46.3% ABV. It's not chill filtered. It's natural color. It runs about $65 Canadian, $65 to $70 Canadian. It is a 10-year-old single malt that is a phenomenal alternative to Isla without having to pay the Isla tax. I really adore it. It's always going to be on my shelf, but I wanted to point and give the award this year to a whiskey that is just a bonkers price in Alberta, a place I buy a lot of whiskey from. That is the Craigellachie 13-year-old Speyside Single Malt Scotch whiskey. It runs on sale about $49 Canadian in Alberta. In BC, it runs about $80 Canadian regular price. This is just an absolute steal, honestly, for a 13-year-old single malt. That's a warm tub distillery. It's super characterful. It's thick. It's oily. It's fruity spirit with very purposeful, like almost like a sulfur funk note to the spirit. I think this is a killer dram. I need to get another bottle of it. And I think it's something that if you're looking for a great value whiskey, should be on your list. Before we get to the last category, I just have to thank you guys so much for all the support in 2023. It's really meant a lot to me. All the comments in the comment section, the conversations that we're having, I'm learning a ton, and I'm also having a lot of fun talking with you guys there. So thank you so much for watching the videos. Thank you for supporting the channel. By commenting, by liking, by sharing, and everything else that you do. Let me know in the comment section below, what were your whiskeys of 2023? What was the best whiskey you had this year? I'm hoping to find my next whiskey in that comment section because, again, I learned a lot from you guys. And thank you so much to my Patreon members. You guys really supported me in such a huge way there, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's time for the final category, and that is Whiskey of the Year 2023. I want to talk about a quick runner-up. It's a whiskey that I cannot and will not shut up about. It just does so much right. That is the KIlchoman 100% Islay single malt Scotch whiskey. This is the batch 10, but I'm talking specifically about the batch 12 and how good that one was. It's bottled at 50% ABV. It's non-chill filters, natural color. It's about 20 phenol parts per million, so lightly peated compared to the other KIlchoman releases at 50 ppm. It runs about $150 Canadian. Why do I love this one? Well, it is about the most Islay whiskey you're gonna find, using peat cut from Loch Gorm nearby the distillery. They're using their own barley they grow on the farms around the distillery. They floor malt at the distillery. They do everything at the distillery, including bottling. And when they bottle, they use their own Islay water, obviously, to reduce it to the bottling strength of 50% ABV. This is just an incredible achievement. It's a phenomenal whiskey that's absolutely delicious, lots of tropical fruits, and that lower phenol count, that lower amount of smoke doesn't obscure the quality and the nature and the characteristics of the distillate quite as much. I love this whiskey. Please go try it if you get a chance. All right, enough is enough fun and games. Let's get to the Whiskey of the Year 2023. And I'm sure I'm going to take some flack for naming this whiskey of the year, but let's talk about it. This is what's in my glass tonight, and that is Springbank 12-year-old cask strength batch 23. This is a Campbelltown single malt. This is a 100% ex-bourbon batch of Springbank 12 cask strength, bottled at 55.9% ABV. It's non-chill filtered, natural color. Again, I'm going to take some hits for this in the comment section, I'm sure, by naming a Springbank product at all. A whiskey of the year, because it's so hard to get. But in all seriousness, this was the best core range whiskey, not single cask whiskey, I had all year. And I should be true to what was the best whiskey. that I had. I don't want to name something else the whiskey of the year just because the best one is hard to get. That doesn't seem fair to Springbank, and that doesn't seem fair to you guys. I want to tell you what my favorite whiskey I had was, and that is this 12 cask strength. Springbank should be recognized for the quality of the whiskey they're putting out, even though it's being sold at a price higher than it should be by some unscrupulous retailers. Now, would we like it to be more available? Absolutely, most certainly. But would we risk the product quality going down, diminishing with the increase in production? I wouldn't do that at all. I originally opened this bottle when Whitecaps FC won their first game of the season in 2023, and I was blown away by how good ex-bourbon Springbank is. It just feels like this is Springbank's character on full display, unadulterated, unobstructed, unobscured. Coastal salinity, tropical fruits, citrus, honeyed sweets, caramel, and that industrial engine oil Campbelltown funk edge that so many of us, including myself, love. I could even see similarities between this and a 27-year-old refill ex-bourbon cask Springbank I got to try this year from a single cask release. This whiskey is simply wonderful, and I can't look past it for my whiskey of the year 2023. Springbank 12 cask strength, batch 23, is my whiskey of the year for 2023. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you once again for an unbelievable year on Whiskey on the West Coast. Again, let me know in the comments down below what are your whiskeys of the year. And until next time, from the West Coast, Happy New Year. If this is the last video you see, I hope to see you in 2024. Sláinte.